principles and schools of thoughts and ideas, right? We learned a little bit about Freud and Piaget, Harrison, and sort of the history of where psychology as a scientific field come from. Talk a little bit about research, and then we talked about the brain the last couple of weeks. Right? Remember, the simple way of understanding the brain and the human body is a very simple approach. Make it simple by referencing things to maybe mechanical things out in the physical world, such as a computer or a machine. So when we learn about those neurons in the brain, we could simply say, hey, the neurons are electrical wires in some sort of frame of reference. Like, okay, that makes sense. Wires communicate electricity, which is basically just information to do something, react, in action of some sort. And like, hey, our human body has all these nerves spread out throughout the body. When we learn about the central and peripheral nervous system, right? Like, well, so those wires kind of extend all out through the body to pick up information, right? To receive, ready to receive information at any point in time. We could maybe say some of our organs are maybe mechanical devices hooked up to pumps. So we say, hey, the body is full of pumps, tubes that do something. Shoot out hormones, pump blood, right? Distribute water, other things, fluids, right? And so we can kind of visualize the human body in that way. It makes us kind of easier to understand, like, how do things happen? How do we interpret information? How do we receive information? What part of the body will it go through? And this kind of lends us to sensation and perception. Right? What we're talking about, we have the capacity, the ability to take in information in the external world of some kind, some sort of energy, make sense of it, process it, interpret it, and move on from there. Have some sort of action, reflection, thought, impulse, in order to perceive it. Now we say sensation and perception are completely different systems. So here we're saying the operant kind of definition is sensation is a detection of environmental stimuli through our sensory organs, such as eyes, ears, skin, nose. Right? So like you are sensing stimuli. You're like, well, what's stimuli? Energy, electrical energy, chemical energy. Right? Like right now, there's a temperature in the room. Is the temperature comfortable? If it's too hot, will that stimulate your brain to say, you know, I think I should take the coat off and do something, have action? If it's too cold, that your brain takes in that information, say, I need to put a coat on. There's an action, right? Something that makes you cross over a threshold for you to do something, process information, right? Even if we talk about food, you say, hey, we're processing chemical information. Like, wow, this tastes good. But why does it taste good? My tongue has received chemical information, different parts of it. You say, wow, this is good because it's sweet, or because it's maybe bitter, right? Umami, right? Like, wow, that's good. My tongue takes the chemical information, it processes it through different parts of the brain, and I perceive it to be good. Like, well, how could you perceive it to be bad? You're like, well, guess what? Maybe if it doesn't look good, it gets mixed up with just the chemical signals because my mind has a memory of things that disgust me. Like, because it visually looks nasty, even when I taste it, it doesn't taste as good. Even though it's the same exact ingredients. It visually looks nasty. Right? You're like, well, you know what? Maybe it doesn't smell as good as my memory or my experience with this particular type of food. Therefore, I don't like the food, even if it's still the same chemical information. Right? So kind of the key words to kind of really hone into with sensation and perception is information. Right? Your body, your brain is an information sensing processing sort of entity, right? Okay, so perception, hey, we interpret the information, right? Using sensory information, right? Transforming raw signals into meaningful experiences and understanding. So right now in this room, you hear maybe the background. You know, like Dr. Boss, I don't hear it all the time. Why? Because you've heard it before. So you've had experience with it. Therefore, it's not relevant or important to you in any way, shape, or form. Now, if you were to hear a gunshot in the hallway or a pop or something, it would stimulate. Why? Because it's new. I've experienced the sound of a firecracker, a gunshot out in the hallway. So new information is very stimulating. Right? We say new information sometimes can be really good new information, like your head will pop up from your laptop. Ooh, it says something interesting there. I really like stimulating information, and my brain says, well, that's something new. Or it's something that I had an experience with, and it makes sense to me. So I'll shake my head. Yeah, that makes sense. If not, maybe like there's just stable information, maybe constant. Like, I don't think it's going to sound similar, but nothing too stimulating. Right, so you say, hey, our perception is different than sensation for all of us. Because we think of this room, we're all sitting in different positions, in different areas in the room. So this impacts your perception of even me or other classmates, or your experience of this kind of course all together, just basic and simple position. If I can move the table and put it in the back of the room, you'll have a different view, different position. You have a whole new experience with it. Right? So like all of us kind of perceive things in a different way. And may be very common themes and patterns, but it may be very unique things that we say we have some sort of experience with. All right, so why do we have these features, right? Why do we have these systems to sense? Well, the reason why you're here is for why do you exist? If you were to say in a natural answer, purely natural, nothing abstract or mythical or creative, why do you exist? What's your purpose? Anyone? You're only here to procreate, to keep the species. Now, anything else you add on top of that, right, that's something personal, right? Ambition and goals and yada, yada, yada. But from a natural point of view, you're here to procreate, and you're here to survive. We all come into the world trying to survive in any way, shape, or form, right? So like there's obstacles in every environment. There's things getting in the way, right? And so what happens is, as you grow up, you have a model of the world. So each one of you have a mental representation of how the world is. It usually is far off on how the world really is. And that's why we say you get stressed. So here's your model of the world, your representation of how the world should go or how the world is. Something new happens that shakes up that model. Now you have anxiety. Like, why are you anxious? Why are you stressed out? I got this going on. I got homework. I got the job. And I got broke up. I got dumped and ghosted or something. You shaking up what you thought the world was versus your perception versus what the actual reality is. And that's why maybe those anxieties or those stressors into exist. So we can relate this information of sensation and perception to you very personally. So like, why are you going through the things that you are going through? So you maybe have to change your representation of the world. And you do, which means it's part of your survival to adapt. So, guess what? Let's say you go out on some dates, and you think it's great, you think everything's wonderful. Guess what? You say, hey, I had a representation of the world. Confusion. You're like, why? Because we say you had a model of how this should go. In your brain, this is how it should go, and it seems like it's good. And new information came up that don't match the model of your world, your mental world. And now you say, this doesn't match. There's a mismatch. Therefore, I'm confused. There's a void, there's a gap in that in-between space. And now I'm stressed. And now I'm depressed. And now I'm sad. And now I can't figure it out. Yada, yada, yada. Right? So think of that. Like, what we sense from people in general is not, or in how we perceive them is not necessarily true. A lot of times we're always off base. But you're like, hey, it's still necessary. Doesn't mean it's bad because it's part of our survival. We're just trying to make sense with limited information. But I don't have to know the information about a human being, a person. I have information that I have, and I'm trying to process it for it to be important and relevant to fill in the voids. Right? Folks said we don't have perfect information. So keep that in mind. You don't have perfect information about an experience. You don't have perfect information about people, even your mom and dad. You know what you know about them, based on your experience of them or things they've told you, conveyed to you. And maybe other parts you don't know about. Right? We don't know really anything. But we're like, we may know enough, because we don't need to know everything about it. We need to know just what's relevant and important in order to survive, adapt, and move forward. So yes, this is kind of the introduction to the discussion on sensation and perception. Okay, first thing we need to do, so we have ears, eyes, skin. Skin is your largest organ, right? You have your tongue to taste and your mouth, right? You have your nose to smell. And you're like, okay, it has to take in energy, different types. But sound comes in waves. So how do I take waves, go into this organ in the ear, process it in a certain part of the brain, interpret it and say this smells like roses. Or I'm sorry. Process it in the ear to say, hey, this sounds like drums. It's like, well, okay, there's a certain pattern to drums. And if I have experience with that pattern, then I already know what drums sound like. So it's not going to require a lot of mental effort to decode what drum sounds like. Now, if you were to hear some new sound, you're like, actually, what is that? Like, the brain's trying to make sense. So here we say we transduce. You take in external information out in the environment. Remember, the human body is just something to take in information, process, do something, right? And we're all different. Right? Some of us are highly stimulated by something. Why? Because that's our experience. Right? We're wired. We would say people are wired. Remember, we said the brain neurons are wired. But you're taking in information, sound, so hear, different types of sound, high pitch, low pitch, bass, right? Volume, all different types of maybe waves, making sense of those sound waves. Light, you're taking in light waves. But like, okay. Taste, you're taking in chemical energy, right? The food, the tacos, the hamburger, all chemicals put together, and now you're receiving those chemicals in your tongue, in your mouth. Say, is it good? Is it sweet, salty, etc.? And skin, touch, force, pressure, texture, right? Some of it's good, we think perceived as good, some of it's perceived as bad. Right? So that's called transduction. So transduction is taking in the energy into the body, right? To process through organs and go through the brain to interpret it as something. A transducer device that converts one kind of energy into another. Remember we say in the brain we have electrical energy. Those neurons are shooting off electrical impulses. Well, a little bit of chemicals as well too, right? Those neurotransmitters. So you're like, well, how did I convert sound waves into electrical information? There's a little bit of chemistry in order to interpret something, right? That would be transduction. All right, now it's different. We say perception is different because we say meaningful patterns produced in the brain organize a sensation. So we're like, hey, you know what? If you listen to a song, you're like, why do you like that song? What is so cool about this song? You're like, hey, Dr. Ross, the song has a pattern of sounds. A pattern. You're like, and I'm going to call it rhythm or something like that. Right? So you're like, I like that particular pattern of sound waves. Maybe add on with the lyrics and the voice and the cadence. Right? All of that. You're like, that's what makes it a good sound to me after I process it in the brain. So I perceive it as a good sound. And once again, that perception will be all different. We all say we hate that song. Other people might be like, we love that song, right? So I might be like, yeah, I love that Sexy Red song. Right? Or I love that NBA Youngboy song. Yeah, no. Alright, but we say, hey, we're picking up patterns of that sound to interpret. Like, I like that pattern, that's why I like the song. Patterns of sound waves and voice and yada, yada, yada. In my brain, I perceive it as good or bad, right? And that perception is different. Okay, and then we select. Reduction of processing load on the brain because sensory receptors do not transduce all the physical energies they encounter. That's simple to say, like, hey, you don't pick up everything. But in some way, you may pick up a lot more than you think. So for example, you came to school today, you got here, however you got here, and along the way, from the time you were awake, let's say from the time you were awake, you came across all these people outside in the environment. You came across all the buildings, the trees, and you're like, can you remember them? Like, no, I can't remember. But is it still there? Like, yes. Your brain is constantly recording everything. So everything in this room. But then later on in there, like, can you recall where such and such said or this? Like, no, I can't. Right? But maybe if you have a dream later, you start to process information that you didn't pay attention to. Like, Dr. Ross, I had that interesting dream. What do you think that comes from? Like, you do know your brain is recording all the information today, whether you pay attention to it or not, fix attention. And now it's going to make sense. It may say something that was a weird person out there that you came across that you didn't pay attention to. Something in the environment. So think about that. We select what's important. There's a ton of information, energies out there that you're constantly getting in. Your brain's recording it. But you don't pay attention to because it's irrelevant to you, not that important, and you're only going to focus on really what's important for you, depending on your goal or task. Like I can make it in class. I don't really care that much about that other stuff. So that would be selection. We selected a small narrow of those physical energies in order to transduce them into relevant or necessary information. Then we have the concept and field of psychophysics, in which we look at relationships between physical stimuli, sensations, and how they evoke in the human observer. Right? So you can kind of study psychophysics and say, like, hey, what makes something stimulating to a person? Right? What makes something not stimulating? Right? And you can say, hey, part of the thing is like I seen that thing 1,000 things, therefore it's not stimulating. I heard that 1,000 times. It's not stimulating, right? You can kind of study that in different people. You can see the threshold in which they elicit a impulse. So remember going back to chapter 1, we looked at, well, chapter 2, we looked at the brain has action potential with those neurons. You say at a certain point, you actually have an impulse. It shoots information to the brain and say, this is something relevant, important, right? Something, and the same we would have here with sensation. We have an absolute threshold, right? The minimum amount of energy required to produce a sensation. So that means the minimum amount of sound for you to even notice that the sound exists. usually we describe it as 50% of a chance of you hearing it. We play the sound to you 10 times, and you hear it at least 5. We like that's your threshold in which you are able to hear that type of sound. Alright, and then I got a little group assignment for you today. So, adaptation. So we're reducing sensory receptor activity in response to unchanging stimuli. Once again, the background is we hear the bends. Like it's constant and unchanging. You don't pay attention to it. Anything that will change, something weird, like you pay attention. Anything in the room that you see, like that's it's not that pay attention to. It seems like normal stuff, right? Casual, but then anything weird. So say like you're driving down the road. Usually we drive unconsciously because we say it's just really memory, muscle memory, and we've done it a million times, right? So you're like, hey, driving down the highway is oftentimes so boring that you can text and drive, listen to your song, you're singing, you're multitasking. If somebody veers into your lane, typically your brain picks up, this is odd. They veered over into my lane, I could potentially hit them and crash. Like I've seen a pattern of how cars should move a billion times while I'm driving, and this is odd. Brain picks it up and then you like hit the brakes, or you get over it, you curse them out, and it starts screaming, get your road rage. Right? And then we have perceptual features, right? Sensory analysis. We process in which the senses divide the world into important perceptual features. Patterns. So let me ask you, like, what would you say is features, a pattern that will make somebody physically attractive? Like, man, I like that person, they're attractive. I'm like, why? What patterns or features about them that you could describe them in a way where, whatever. Right? It's kind of difficult to answer that question because you're like, I don't know. I mean, it's a combination of all sorts of things. If it's like 5 or more things, or if it's 10 or more things. Right? You said if you rearrange those things slightly, now they're not attractive to me. Okay? All sorts of things. Or maybe if they talk, and you're like, well, guess what? Physically, I perceive you as attractive now. Using my ears, they're unattractive because it's not things that I like. Right? I perceive the information coming out of her mouth as negative. Right? So that's kind of where we take on sensory analysis, where we're constantly analyzing patterns. Right? Patterns and features of all sorts of things. Like I said, songs. Songs have a pattern, either it's a good song or a bad song based on the patterns. Right? Lyrics, vibe, cadence, bass, whatever, right? So, when we ask you within your groups, you talk next to the person next to you, and you talk to each other. You talk to each other. Hey, what is something that you sense in your personal lives that you perceive completely different? That you feel that there's a big degree of difference in terms of what you actually sense than what you perceive. What's maybe an example or an experience that you had? Maybe something about a person, maybe it was something about food, something about something, right? That you took in information, you perceived it a certain way, you interpreted it a certain way, but you found out it was completely off base. That it was not, that gap was not as close as you thought it was. I'll give you about 3 minutes to talk about that with your groups. Come up with an example when you are off base.
Like
Doesn't have to be a person, but it can be an experience. Alright, so what are your examples? Here, did you have any examples that you could use? Perception and sensation. Anything you feel like we were off base about? Can't think about it? Go ahead.
You said when you start talking to somebody, like trying to get to date them, and they'll come off as a whole different person, then like a few weeks or like a month into it, they just switch up and they become a whole different person.
So it's like at the beginning, you're being there reference.
Like when I go fast, they gotta know what they, what? That's what you want?
But, okay, so look, but think about this, it's kind of a two-way street. Like, you're going into something new, which is stimulating, we said, right? You're receiving new information, because it's a new person. Anything new is stimulating. Anything not new is boring. That's why you don't, you know what I mean? Like people, whatever, don't respond to anything that they say to me all the time, right? It's not new. But if it's new and good, you're like, that's gonna increase your motivation as a person. So you're going into it like, oh, this is gonna be wonderful. Yes, you become intrigued or infatuated with all the things, which means that in your mind, it's probably something off. Right? You should maybe chill back and take in more information before you start to get all giddy about it. Right? And guess what? Over time, you're like, man, there was a big gap on how I perceived this person versus the truth. I got more information, get to know them, and they show their true colors. Now reality and ideals match. Right? They start to match. Because remember we said all your experience in life is modeled. Since you were born, you get a representation of the world and how things should go. Right? And then you get new information that don't match. Now you got anxiety or stress. I'm stressed out. Why? Because this is not how I expected it to go. School, relationships, jobs, family, everything. You guys gonna take off?
Yeah, I was gonna say something about you. For me personally, if someone told me something about somebody who's sober, we have to get it. And sometimes I can read people's bad energy before you speak to them.
Yeah, you're picking up energy, isn't it? All right, good luck with the visit.
Thank you.
All right. You like something purely visual aesthetic. You know, this is why, you know, the word suit comes from suit of armor, right? They almost kind of find it like some indefensible thing. So when a guy wears a suit, let's say a man wears a suit, we've been kind of unconsciously feel that they've been raised up a higher level, right? Almost some nobility, like they're wearing an actual hard suit of armor. And it changes the way we perceive people. That's why they say, I'm telling you, just try these things. As for guys, wear a suit and see how people treat you. Oh, excuse me, sir, let me get the door for you. Oh, that is from clothes? Yes. People perceive, because they have a model representation. They have a representation of who should be taken serious and who should not. Based visually, what kind of car you drive, where do you live, what do you dress in, right? And people will treat you accordingly because that's their representation, their model. Right? Remember we said we also have like model of beauty, standards of beauty, right? And that's like a model. Right? Beauty has to be this and this and that. How about in the back? Do you have any examples? No. All right. Here's our next sort of project. Okay, I want to see how well you can analyze paying attention. So what I want you to do is count how many times the people in this video, players, who are only wearing white, not the people who are wearing things other than white shirts. How many times did they get past the basketball? Right? Let's see how well you're able to focus and analyze. So everybody watching, let's put the video on. Let's see who can come up with the correct answer, the correct number. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball.
How many times the players wearing white pass the basketball?
Okay.
Keep paying attention to the white shirts. Count.
How many passes did you count?
How many? How many passes?
16. I got 16.
16. You said 16?
16.
I'm gonna say like, probably like 15.
15. 13. 13?
Oh, that was 16.
How about back? 6.
It got a little skippy. No, they.
So I heard 13, I heard 14, I heard 15, and I heard 16. Let's see what the number is.
The correct answer is 15 passes.
Excellent. Raise your hand if you said 15.
You said 16.
All see your hand. Raise your hand if you saw the gorilla.
Huh?
We're kind of there. I know something about the gorilla, so I was paying attention to the white shirt.
We went looking over.
Raise your hand if you saw the gorilla.
The gorilla was kind of.
One person, you saw the gorilla? 2.
What was that?
Did you really see the gorilla or you said?
I saw it. I saw it. I
See the gorilla?
It passed in the middle. Right. Standing there like that the whole time.
Here, we'll replay it. They're gonna replay the video. Let's see it.
But did you see the gorilla?
No.
Oh, I did see them. I did see the gorilla, but I ain't gonna tell you.
I
I
didn't hear that. I ain't seen no.
I seen them.
This video is frozen.
Hey, that's funny. That was a good one.
I want that text.
Also, you know how there's the solution for like, if there's like a battery and a turning, and it could be like turning left or right? I found out I could like turn it either way, like whenever I want to, and I don't know why I'm able to do that.
It's
I'm
good
just
both
like,
ways.
I want to do that, no, I want to turn it right. I just do it like this, like, it's like a video, and I don't know why.
Well, remember we said, hey, it's different from us. We all notice the differences in stimuli at different points. We have a different threshold, right? So for you, like, I actually can see the turn both ways, right? Is what you're saying?
Yeah, like.
And like someone else cannot. Many factors, right? It could just be something that you have inside of you. Maybe you have experience with objects like that, and you can see subtle differences. But it's, it depends. It just really depends. We all maybe perceive things in a different way, right? A different threshold. All right, then we code the information like computers, right? Convert them into features of the world into messages understood by the brain. Right? So we're like, our brain is like a computer. It programs and codes information where it actually makes sense. Right? And say human mind, we don't like things that don't make sense. We don't like the void. We don't like the unknown. The unknown actually gives us anxiety and stress. So therefore we fill in the void or the unknown with garbage information, which means we'll force the meaning. We'll force things to be meaning. That's why we have a lot of biases, a lot of prejudice, a lot of judgment, stereotypes, all this stuff. If we don't have enough information, we'll force the information, right? Because we don't like not knowing. The mind doesn't like that, right? Because it's part of our survival and adaptation is knowing. We want to know what to expect. If we can't expect it, we're like we're bracing ourselves for the worst. Usually it's negative. So, okay, going back to kind of your example with ballerina, it's like there's a big difference threshold, the minimal difference between two stimuli. Maybe the minimal difference between the turning of it required before two stimuli to be coded is different. It's different, right? So like you can maybe notice different stimulating twisting patterns, right? Torsion patterns of turning that maybe others do. So your brain can code it a lot easier than others. Like I gotta see it multiple times before my brain starts to make sense that something different is happening. Which we kind of call just noticeable difference. Right? Slightly. At some point, you can notice there's a difference. At some point, you can notice that red is no longer red, but it's something else. At some point, you can notice that blue is no longer blue. Right? At some point, it's different for all of us. And then we've got sensory localization, the type of sensation you experience depending on which area of the brain is activated. So once again, you like when we eat food, what all senses are involved in eating food?
Touching, smell, seeing. I don't like the smell of it.
Yeah, you kind of like all of them, really. What about even sound? Could sound be impacted when you're experiencing food? I mean, maybe you hear the crackling of the bacon in the pan that's been like prepared or something, right? Like that might actually get you ready and prepared to eat bacon, right? You know, if you can taste the bacon before you even eat it, just because you can hear it, you know, it's bacon or fried chicken. Yeah, and then you're looking at it like, I can taste it already. Like, how do you taste it already? I have a lot of memories of eating good fried chicken, and I'm already expecting it.
Isn't that also like you look at an object and you already know what the texture feels like on your tongue?
Yes. Yeah. So like even when it comes to texture. So me, for example, yeah, I'm a texture person too. I'm like, so for me, I don't like octopus, calamari, and mushrooms.
I don't like mushrooms.
texture.
like tomatoes.
So if I eat mushrooms, I'm thinking of octopus calamari. If I eat calamari, I'm thinking of mushrooms. So I don't like the texture of that. And therefore, it's not gonna be a good experience with food if I have to eat that. Also unpack it is our memory. So you can be like, man, I smell, it smells like my grandfather. Like, what, the smell smells like you're somebody you knew in the past? Like, yeah. You're like, man, because that sensation that I have in my perception is in my long-term memory, it's there permanently, right? Like, it's there for good. So I will retrieve that memory every time I smell something similar, a similar pattern of a scent. When we say smelling is chemicals, a similar pattern of chemicals I take into my nose, if it's the right pattern of chemicals, I might have a memory about that chemical, a memory about that scent, in essence. Okay, visible light, seeing. Human beings are primarily visual. We say that. We say that because your eyes have the most receptors than any other organ in your body. Right? So you say usually the eyes is the most important thing for survival. Right? You need to see things probably first to process information about that thing for your own survival. Right? You may pull in information, other types of information just from looking at it. But here's the thing. Do we see all light? Do we see all available light that's out there in the universe? What do we see? So think about light. We say, hey, light is part of the electromagnetic spectrum. It means gamma rays is light in some way. X-rays is light. You can't see through people's bodies like an X-ray machine can. Right? Different wavelength of light.
So photons?
Hmm?
So photons?
Yeah, like photons are waves, right? Photons are waves. Photons, if we capture it at one particular instance, so really waves. They're both. Sometimes called wavelengths, particles and waves together, right? So you're like, man, I can't see that. I can't see. Can you see the microwaves and you put the food in the microwave? Can you see the actual microwaves?
No.
No. Right? But that's light as well too, right? So you're like, what can we see? What we can see is a very narrow strip in all of that electromagnetic spectrum, and it's just called visible light. Right? It's the part that human beings can pick up with the organs that we have, the eyes that we have, and the receptors that we have, right? And which would respond to. But X-rays we can't see, but that's still light, electromagnetic spectrum. Gamma rays you can't see, microwave, even radio waves, right? They're coming to your phone right now. All radio waves for the internet, for you to make phone calls, coming in and out of your phone every second. Can you see it? Can't see it, right? So we can only see visible light. And then we have things like hue, right? So we'll talk about like kind of the anatomy of eyes, kind of maybe next class, right? But like simply put, your eyes have these rods and cones. Are you familiar? Have you heard of rods and cones before? In your eyes? Rods and cones. Right? So you say the rods are there to pick up grayscale images. Things like in low light or in the nighttime. In order for you to see quick movements of things. Which means men particularly have a ton of rods to pick up grayscale images or dark images. Right? Like from a natural perspective, it's because men should be protectors. Right? And evolutionarily, we've been looking to see if wolves come in, it's nighttime, is there a bear, is there something in the background that can come kill us? Right? So men have a high degree of those rods, but women tend to have more cones cones than men. And those cones are there for processing color information, right? And also a little bit of light and dark as well too, for color information, right? So with that visible light that we talked about, if you're only picking up, basically the receptor cells in your eyes only picking up red, green, and blue. And with that red, green, and blue receptor cells, you're able to mix all three colors to make sense of every color imaginable. Whether it's orange, purple, fuchsia, whatever the case may be, right? So that's why if you look at your TVs, you kind of see the RGB, like you're looking back at your TV. You're like, well, why is TVs red, green, and blue? They're like, that's based off the human eye, right? The concept of TV is based off what we're able to actually see, right? All right, and so these happen at different light wavelengths, and then things are saturated. You reach which wavelengths of light are pure or mixed. So you can kind of think of things, when it comes to saturation, you kind of can think of things almost like an LED TV versus like a cathode ray TV before, old school TVs before LEDs. Like LEDs, what they do is have tiny little blocks of light, right? You can see what you call resolution, just like your computer screen. Like, man, you got a really good screen now. It has a high resolution, 4K, 8K. Before it was 1080p, right? You look on YouTube, some of the 1080p videos, right? So it's kind of distorted, right? Don't look as good, right? That kind of goes along with mixture of saturation and brightness, right? So your eyes are the same way, it's kind of pixelated in a way to make sense of very small details of color. But women can process more color detail than men can. So, you know, some of you, if you ask your brother, ask your boyfriend, like, hey, do you like this color of nail? This color of purple? It's like it's purple. You're like, no, it's not purple. I got it from Sephora, and it's this, and this. And like, he can't see it, right? Biologically, he can't see the difference. Remember we said the stimuli, the difference between these two different things. Right? He can't put it into another category. But then it's mine. What time is it? Okay. We'll talk a little bit about the eye, and I'll also put up some imagery for you to see. Okay, eye, the structure of the eye, right? You're like, your eyes are a pretty fascinating thing. Once again, we say it picks up the most information than pretty much any other organ to make sense and interpret. So we have things like the iris. It's called a circular muscle that controls the amount of light entering the eye. Right? And some people have different colored eyes. Usually the different colored eyes are made while you're in mom's stomach. And what happens with the eye, there are little strands, right? In the iris, little strands in the iris that looks like little spaghetti strands. And what happens during prenatal development is those strands spin. And they spin a certain way to either they will reflect more light or not reflect. So if we see somebody with light eyes, green eyes, blue eyes, gray eyes, hazel eyes, we can determine that the pattern of their iris. Somebody Google, let me say it right here. The strands in the eye up close. Right? We can take a look at what example of human iris, right? When we say there's little spindles in there, right? Kind of look like spaghetti files, kind of thing. And however they're arranged,
They also like a flower.
yeah, however these strands are arranged, usually will determine how much light is reflected. So we say like a person with light eyes, green, blue, blah, 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 reflect a ton of light based on the pattern, right? And maybe some other kind of chemical compositions, right, from genetics, right? But the pattern's important. And then you say for those of us who have brown eyes, things are kind of placed in a way to where they don't reflect that much light. So it's dark, right? Bright reflects light, right? Dark doesn't reflect as much light. So that's kind of how that iris is able to create that color spectrum. Okay, pupil. I was trying to pull up all of these. Right, and so the center is the pupil. So the pupil allows light in your eyes. And once again, kind of like wait. So your pupil reacts automatically. It's like, yeah, it can dilate, right? Or constrict. Dilate means open up, right? And constrict. Now, interesting enough, the pupil actually, which is, interesting, the pupil, whether it opens or closes, it's kind of part of the same mechanism as we call a sphincter, which means like your stomach, your esophagus opens up and closes, right? There's another part too where you can use the bathroom from sitting on the toilet. Also, it's the same mechanism. The sphincter opens and closes to allow things out of your body, et cetera, right? Kind of same mechanism. What we say here is to allow light. So if you were to say, hey, I'm gonna take some cocaine, some heroin, some meth, or whatever, you're like, well, what happens to the eyes? And why does it happen? But what happens to the eye? Why does it happen? What kind of experience it gives us? You like if you take cocaine and say, Dr. Ross, I cannot sleep. And I said, why biologically? Because your pupils will not constrict. It's constantly allowing so much light in that my brain says we are hyper aware and hyper awake all the time. Right? You're letting in so much, like I'm bombarded with information in my mind. I'm seeing things, all sorts of crazy things, right? And then when you get tired, let's say you weren't on drugs and you start to constrict by the time you get ready for sleep, you're like, oh, we don't need light in our eyes like that right now, brain. We need you to close up this pupil, right? So the pupil is there to let in more light, and light is information, right? So with that information, we'll have a response. When it dilates, less information. That's why when the police pull you over and they want to know if you're on something abnormal,
They put
they're
it
gonna
all in your face.
yes, and I'm sure shoot it in your eye, and they're gonna say, wait, does this person's eye look like this? Or does this person's eye look like this? And just that small degree will give you kind of a good indicator on this person's on something. We don't know which one.
You know somebody knows something about that view?
Yeah. Or you could, or sometimes you could look at sometimes you could look at a person and see their state of mind, right? This is an automatic reaction. That's why I say the eyes don't lie. Right? That's kind of a term phrase.
Like when people look away when they cry.
The eyes will automatically react.
I know you laugh. Or I know my mama be like, fix your face, cause I still love. I ain't saying that she should.
So, like, sometimes if we know a person is lying, we can see the reaction of their pupils. Because to have a lie requires energy. You get what I'm saying? Lying requires energy, mental energy. Telling the truth requires no energy. Remember we said it's a consistent pattern. If you know what happened and that's the truth, consistent pattern. If you know what happened and you know the truth and you lie, you have to do something else. You have to react something different outside of that real pattern. And with that reaction, it's like that requires information and more energy. You can look at somebody's people and sometimes think they're full of lies. Right? The CIA and FBI use a lot of those tactics to kind of see what's going on. All right, let's do this. We'll touch base more about the eye and the anatomy of the eye next class. So we'll kind of get out of here a little bit early today. But remember, Thursday we'll have our quiz review, so please be here. We're going to have our quiz over the weekend. I'll upload the slides for you to reference.